Consumed. Westlake Trilogy Book 1 by J.C. Jarrett. Part 2. Chapter 7. Shadows of the Past. The silver blade flared a brilliant blue as it swung in an arc, paralleling the ground, going for the warrior's midsection. Easily ducking under the attack, the warrior launched one of his own by kicking out in a wide leg sweep. The warrior's opponent jumped over the leg sweep, landing gently on the balls of her feet. Still down in a crouch, the warrior sent out a slender blade going for his opponent's belly, but a silver blade dived in, defeating the attack. Glancing up, the warrior was forced to leap over the eager attack of his second opponent. Her blue eyes flashed mischievously from under her bright red hair. The warrior looked to his first attacker, whose emerald eyes shared the same twinkle of the other opponent, knowing that they had him on the defensive. The two women slowly began to circle the warrior, their matching red hair waving in the breeze. Peyton turned so he could see both of them from the corners of his eyes. Then he snapped a blade up toward each of them, just in time to block the simultaneously incoming attacks. His hands worked independently of each other, blocking each attack from the women and even slipping in a few of his own. The younger of his opponents growled in frustration, having every one of her attacks foiled by the warrior's slender saber. Tossing caution aside, she rushed in at the warrior, hoping to force him to make a mistake, but she was the one in error. The warrior sensed her attack. Stepping quickly back with his left foot, he extended his right. The young attacker realized what the warrior had done, but not before she had already committed herself to follow through. Unable to stop her momentum, she tripped over the warrior's extended foot, skidding to a stop on her chest in the dirt. Rolling quickly, she tried to get on her back to block the attack she knew was coming. The straight saber's tip lightly touched her chest right over her heart as the warrior bent down and kissed her softly on the forehead. Coming back up quickly and falling back into a combat stance, the warrior watched his opponent's emerald eyes flash with her mischievous grin. Flipping the sword in the air, she reversed her grip on the blade, charging in her red-gold hair streaming behind her. She spun, throwing every ounce of strength she had behind the attack. Just as she knew would happen, twin straight sabers intercepted her furious attack. As the three blades hit, the sound of ringing steel echoed across the rolling fields of grass. The woman's green eyes darted down to see what C expected. The warrior's feet were far apart, bracing for the incoming attack. Quickly, her foot shot out, catching the warrior's leg, sending it out from under him. Peyton looked up from his seat on the ground and enjoyed his view wholeheartedly. Elisa stood victorious over the warrior. Her red-gold hair shimmered in the sun as her whole beautiful face lit with the smile she wore on it. Up came the silver blade. Its edge flared its bright blue as she hung it in his face. Quickly, Peyton tossed his blades aside, putting his hands up in defeat. "I yield. I yield," he said in mock panic. "I almost had you this time, Father." The young redhead said from where she still sat on the ground. Peyton and Elisa both turned to see the young woman of about 16 years, her long red hair clinging to her beautiful face as sweaty strands. Peyton marveled at how fast his daughter had grown. "You was very impressive, and I would guess normally that attack would have worked. But you still left yourself open? Remember," said the downed warrior, but was cut off by his daughter. "I know. If your mind is only as sharp as your blade, you say that all the time," her voice having a slight bit of sarcasm surfacing in it. Peyton looked to his wife, Elisa, then back to his daughter. "Jana, I understand I say it all the time, but it was driven into me by your grandfather, and it saved my life more than once. And your mother's life, so forgive me," the father said to his daughter in a caring voice. The girl tossed her head back, sweeping her sweaty hair behind her. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I didn't know," the young woman said, her blue eyes showing her empathy with her father. "I love you with all I am, Jana, and I want you to survive in this world that can be so cruel. So if I say something over and over, it's because it's important, and one day it may save your life like it did mine," the warrior father explained to his daughter. Jana looked at her parents and smiled. "I understand," said the young warrior standing, sheathing her long sword. The brooding young woman began to walk away from her parents, the events of the past few minutes playing out in her mind. Peyton watched the girl walk away, lost in her own thoughts, then turned his attention back to the beautiful Elisa standing before him. "She's still young," Elisa excused for her daughter. "The same age we were when we met." He replied, "She will learn. She is already a better warrior than Darton," she said with a bit of levity, the sun shining through her red-gold hair, reminding him just how beautiful she was. Elisa stuck out her hand to help her husband to his feet. Reaching out, he took her offered hand. Then with a huge grin, he pulled hard, bringing her down into his lap. She giggled like she was 20 years younger as he wrapped his arms around her. Lowering his head, their lips touched in a gentle kiss, causing her arms to snake around him. His fingers ran through her thick curls as she held him tighter. Slowly, they separated, a twinkle in her eyes. "You know now you're my prisoner." But before she could finish, her husband interrupted her. "Darling, I have always been your prisoner." Elisa's mouth turned up in a grin, and a single tear of joy rolled down her cheek as she kisses her husband again. Peyton took a bite out of a hunk of cheese as he sat leaning against a large tree. Elisa sat by his side, her body pressed to him, his arm around her as they both watched Jana. The girl ran through several attack routines in the tall grass, her long red hair flying behind her. A smile spread across the warrior's face. He could not believe how much time had passed. Turning his head to look at his beautiful wife, her eyes partially closed as she drifted off to sleep, relaxed with him here. Peyton enjoyed his time with his family, but his work had sometimes kept him gone for several weeks. Peyton thought about the choices that had brought him here, and very quickly he decided he wouldn't change a thing. Nearly a year after he freed Elisa from Grover, the word of his actions spread all the way to the city of Port Haven. The city council was looking to hire lawbringers for the outlying area. Hearing of his exploits, the council sent a man to speak to the warrior about becoming one of 8 marshals, to help right the wrongs in the lawless lands. Peyton had talked it over with his wife, and knowing he had no skill at farming nor a trade, he turned to what skill he did have: skill with a blade. It was long days in the beginning, but as people began to see that the law was here now beyond the city walls, things began to get better. That was until the goblins rose up and started a war led by Gorthok. The Goblin War had lasted nearly a year. Several good men and goblins died in the needless conflict. But since the fall of Gorthok, there has been complete peace with the goblins. That was all behind him now. For 8 months ago, he had ridden into Port Haven and spoke with the council, retiring his commission so he could be where he wanted to be, with his family in peace, where we felt he belonged. "Peyton," the woman called to him, pulling him from his slumber. The warrior having joined his wife in a nice nap under the large tree. Opening his eyes, he quickly looked about for danger, but all he found was Elisa still seated with him, though awake now, and Jana still putting her long sword through spins and slashes. He wondered where the girl got her energy, or maybe he was just getting older, he thought. "It's going to be dark soon. We should head back to the house," the warrior said. His dream of the days of being a marshal and his time in the Goblin War brings several bad memories of what sometimes hid in the darkness. Calling out to Jana, she ran over, and with a near-exhausted look on her face, have practiced most of the day. The trio began the short walk together back to their home. Soon the large one-story farmhouse rolled into view. Peyton looked at the house as memories once more stirred in his mind. "Are you sure, Darton?" the young warrior asked as he watched his young wife, her belly swollen with child, walk toward the house. "Yes, I'm sure, Peyton. You and Elisa are going to need a lot more space than that one room you have now at your father's," the young man said, looking at his cousin. "Anyway, when Father died last winter, Mother was never the same. She went to live with her sister. As soon as I'm 16, I'm joining the Port Haven Guard, and I already talked to Uncle Rand. He said I could have your room while he taught me some sword play." Darton finished with a grin. Part of the way through Darton's words, Peyton's attention was pulled away from his cousin to his wife, as she stood seemingly catatonic staring at the deck of the porch. The warrior walked over, running his arms around here, feeling her press back against him, her breath releasing. Looking over her shoulder, he saw what had grabbed her attention. Nearly 1.5 feet long, the slice through the plank flooring still had a dark stain around it from the day Elisa cut off Grover's hand. Putting his lips close to her ear, the warrior whispered, "If there are too many bad memories, we can build behind Father's house on top of that small hill." Reaching up, she took his hands, entwining hers over his, all 4 hands caressing her swollen stomach. Leaning her head back on him, "We will make our own happy memories here, too, overshadow the bad," the soon-to-be mother said as she smiled up at her husband. Peyton smiled at the memory of his cousin Darton, who did go on to join the Guard and had made a name for himself. He looked at the 2 beautiful girls in his life as they walked on together toward the house and decided life was grand, or at least in his mind it was. Sudden movement from the front of the farmhouse caused Peyton stop the trio, going into a crouch. Elisa and Jana instantly followed. A black horse with a saddle stood tethered to the porch rail of their home. A tall, dark figure paced the length of the porch, seeming to be in wait or a lookout. Peyton watched the figure for several seconds, then he leaned over to whisper into Elisa's ear. She listened intently, then relayed to Jana. Together, the mother and daughter slipped into the tall grass, seeming to vanish. Peyton stayed there for several seconds, giving them the time they needed, then started on down the hill. Walking toward the house as if he had not seen the figure, Peyton rested his palms on his saber hilts that hung off each hip. Watching intently past the house, though, he saw Elisa and Jana come from the tall grass going around the back of the house. "You seem lost?" the warrior called out toward the porch, hoping to draw the figure out into the dim evening light. The figure stepped from the shadow of the porch into the dim light. Peyton tried to hide his surprise at the appearance of the stranger. Tall and thin, his skin a flawless bone-white color, contrasting with his long black hair. The stranger's eyes seemed to pierce into his soul, with their complete gold color with no visible pupils. Peyton had seen a few highborns before, and had heard enough stories about the long-lived race that he was instantly able to recognize this stranger for what he was. "My name is Jander. I'm the new marshal for this area." His voice, though melodic, the highborn's accent sounded as if he was reading from a parchment. Peyton stood expecting the highborn to continue, and after a long, uncomfortable silence, he did. "There was a merchant caravan ambushed by raiders about 10 miles from here 4 nights ago." Again, Jander stood silent, as if he had to prepare his words carefully before he could carry on. The lone survivor spoke of a huge, fat man, who told him to make sure to tell Marshal Westlake, "I told you this wasn't over. You're a fool. If you hadn't let that man live, we wouldn't be hiding right now." The tall, dark-headed man shouted at the huge fat man, whose eye narrowed over his large, bushy beard. Standing, he put his face less than an inch from the dark-haired man's face. "Fool am I, Marcus? Well, anytime you want to go, take off, but remember where I found you. I'm sure the wharf streets in Port Haven could use another beggar." His gravel voice flowed calmly, taking Marcus by surprise. Marcus looked down at the cannonball fashioned over the stump of the fat man's right forearm. "No, Grover, I'll stay. I just hate waiting. You know." The man fumbled over his words in fear of the fat man. Grover stepped back, looking at his crew of 6 cutthroats as they sat around the small fire. "Waiting. I've been waiting 17 years to extract my revenge on the Westlakes. We stick to the plan. We wait for Nub-Nub to bring him to us. Then it's time for some fun." The fat man grumbled as an evil grin spread across his bearded face. The worried father stood in the doorway watching the red-haired young women sleeping peacefully. Slowly, he crept into the room, knelling down beside the bed. Peyton sat for several minutes watching his daughter. Reaching out, he brushed her hair from her face. "I love you," he whispered as he bent over, kissing his sleeping daughter on the cheek. Turning as he exited the room, he took one last look at his daughter. He couldn't shake the feeling he may never see her again. "Goodbye," he barely whispered as he shut the door. Saddlebags lay on the table in the sitting room as he packed away supplies and a few changes of clothing. Elisa stood off to his left, watching with a tearful, confused look on her face. "Please, Peyton, just tell me what has happened," she blurted through her tears. The focused warrior continued to pack his saddlebags, hearing her but not wanting to explain to his wife why he was leaving. "I thought you were retired. I thought your family was more important than anything to you," the distraught woman said, trying to get her husband's attention. "There's just something I have to do." The warrior's voice had grown cold and anger filled without him meaning it to. As soon as the words left his lips, he regretted it. He had never meant to talk to her that way. In the last 20 years, they had never even raised a voice to each other, and now he had to her. Turning, he looked at his wife. The lamplight flickered across her worried features. Reaching out, he took her in his arms. "I'm sorry. I know you don't understand," was all he managed to say before she cut him off. "You're right, I don't understand. Because my husband won't talk to me." Her voice showing a little anger and a lot of fear. Peyton held her tight, closed his eyes while taking a deep breath. He's back. Slowly, the warrior walked out the door and to his horse, standing in wait a few yards away. Strapping his saddlebags on, he turned to see Elisa silhouetted in the light of the doorway. Peyton stood looking at the beautiful woman standing there and could not believe he was leaving. He walked back to her, taking his wife in his arms. He pulled her tight to him. The scent of her hair filled his nostrils, reminding him of rose petals. The warrior held her, and she held him, both gaining strength from the other. Bending down just the slightest, he tenderly pressed his lips to hers. He felt her seem to melt in his arms. Reaching up, he laid his hand on the side of her face, then run his fingers through her long, wavy red-gold locks. When the kiss ended, both stared into the other's eye, and at the same time they both spoke the same words. "I love you." The memory of the first time those words were spoken in exactly the same way came back to both of them. Stealing one more small kiss, she then watched her warrior husband climb onto his horse. Peyton turned and took one last look at his wife. "I'll be home in a few days. For good this time," he said, never taking his eyes away from her. Jander pulled the reins of his horse, coming to a halt beside Peyton. The warrior took one last look at his wife before turning his head toward his strange new companion. Peyton looked at the highborn, and it worried him to be going off into battle with an unknown partner. This highborn was selected to be a marshal, so that should account for something the warrior thought. Peyton nodded to Jander, telling him he was ready. He felt he had held the highborn up long enough. Together, the odd pair turned their horses, riding off in decent past trot. Peyton's heart pulled at him to turn about and ride straight home to be with his loved ones, to abandon this self-appointed quest. The warrior in him craved vengeance for what Grover had done, and the warrior won. Slowly, his thoughts turned back to that a dreadful day nearly 12 years ago. The old wagon rolled along the dusty road, its single horse pulling at a slow but steady pace. Little Jana lay in the back of the cart. Her head full of red hair curls rested on a small sack of grain as she slept. Elisa turned from checking on the young girl and cuddled back up with her husband, using him to fight the chill in the winter air. Peyton looked at his wife, and as always, when her emerald eyes met his, butterflies swirled in his stomach. She had no idea what she did to him. She owned him heart and soul. A smile spread across the warrior's face, for he knew he had the two greatest treasures in the world, Elisa and Jana. The small three-room house, which the family knew all so well, came into view as the wagon rolled over the small hill. Peyton looked down at his father's home, his warrior instincts buzzing in the back of his mind. He watched the house, but could never put his finger on what could be the cause. As the wagon pulled to the front of the house, his worry increased. His father always met visitors outside. His mind fully in tune with his instincts, he never thought to stop Jana as she leapt from the cart calling. "Grandpa, Grandpa, Grandpa," she called while running for the door. Elisa's hand had been resting on her husband's forearm when she saw her daughter run up the 3 stairs toward the front door of the house. Her fingers tightened, nails digging into Peyton's arm, drawing blood. Turning to see what was wrong with his wife, the warrior suddenly leapt over her, landing hard on the balls of his feet, running for the door. Grabbing up Jana as she stood staring at the pair of legs in a pool of crimson sticking from the opened front door. As soon as his hands touched her, it brought her from her partial catatonic state, bring cries of fear and confusion. Peyton handed his daughter to Elisa, who pulled her tight to her, hiding her eyes from the grisly scene. The warrior's worried eyes met his wife's fearful gaze, the two exchanging fears without uttering a word. Peyton turned for the door, his blades in hand, but with no memory of drawing them. The worried son approached the door, seeing only darkness beyond its opening. Skirting the pool of blood, the warrior nudged the door open with the point of a slender blade, revealing the rest of the corpse as it lay face down in its own blood. Looking back out to Elisa, seeing she held Jana tight with one arm and the other gripped her silver blade, its edge flaring a soft blue. Peyton moved through the door, stepping over the body. Worry turned into a full-blown panic at the sight of the house. Nothing was where it should have been, furniture overturned, books scattered. The warrior slipped fully into his training in an effort to stay calm. Bloodied boot prints ran all over the floor, the warrior making out at least 7 different sets, one being nearly 2 foot long. Peyton crouched beside the corpse, reaching out. He grabbed the hair of its head, pulling back. He lifted its face from the floor. A sickening sucking sound emitted from it as the flesh separated from the congealed blood. Looking at the man's face, he saw it was not his father, bringing a sense of relief that only lasted a second. The warrior stood stepping lightly toward his father's bedroom, seeing that bloody handprints joined the boot prints. Stopping at the door, he looked toward the back door, seeing it opened, and another corpse laying there, its head laying off to the left of it with a mass of blood-caked blonde hair. Questions filled the warrior's mind of what had happened here. Slowly pushing open the door, the unmistakable smell of blood and decay washed over him. Fighting back his revulsion, the warrior stepped into the room. The sights inside almost brought the man to his knees. The bed was caked in the blood of the body that lay upon it. Peyton looked at the corpse. His heart skipping beats, the warrior finally did collapse to his knees. Blades panged off the floor as they fell from his hands. There on the bed laid the warrior's father. The man had been tied to the 4 posts of the bed, his right arm hanging from a rope after being cut from his body. Rand's left eye had been ripped from its socket, lay now on the nightstand by the bed. A look of hatred, frozen on the man's face. Peyton looked at the corpse of his father. Bile rose quickly in his throat, causing him to turn his head, vomiting his stomach's contents onto the floor. "Oh, gods, why?" the anguished man screamed, raising his eyes to the ceiling as if he could look the gods in the face and ask them. In doing so, he saw a message that he knew was meant for him. "I told you this was not over," written in blood over the bed. Rage tore through the warrior, pushing away his grief as he stood picking up his blades. Walking to the mutilated body of his father, the warrior spoke his voice devoid of emotion. "When I find him, he will breathe no more. This I swear, Father. I swear." Taking the glass oil lamp from the nightstand, Peyton poured part of its contents across the body, then ran a trail out of the room all the way to the house's front door. Elisa watched as her husband walked from the house, dropping the glass globe upon the floor. The sound of the glass shattering still caused her to jump, even though she expected it. She looked at Peyton, seeing the look in his eyes. "No, no, no," she cried, her face scrunching up in grief as tears began to fall from her green orbs. She knew the look that Peyton now had. It was the same as the day he had almost murdered Grover. She also knew what it meant. Elisa climbed down from the wagon. "Please tell me it's not true," she wailed as her knees buckled. She had loved Rand. He was the closest thing she ever had to a father. Peyton stepped forward and took a knee holding his devastated wife as she cried against him, as her tears soaking into his shirt. Raising his head, he looked past his wife and straight into the blue eyes of Jana as she sat upon the wagon. "Where's Grandpa?" she asked in her little voice. Peyton's heart was torn to shreds as his vision blurred with tears. He had no idea how to tell his daughter what had happened to her beloved grandfather. Standing, he brought his wife with him, held her tight for a few seconds, gaining strength for what he knew he had to do. Stepping away from her, he walked back to the door, bending down. He pulled the tender box from his belt. Striking the flint, the oil caught, sending a blue flame racing through the house toward the bed. Turning away, the grief-stricken son rejoined his family as they watched tearfully the house burn to cinders. "Marshall, Marshall," the strange accented voice called, trying to get the warrior's attention. Peyton was pulled from his thoughts by the highborn as he rode next to him. "Call me Peyton. I'm no longer a marshal." The warrior's voice sounded as distant to himself as his thoughts. Jander nodded his long face toward the troubled man. "What makes you think he will be there?" the highborn asked. "Because there is where it all started."